Yeah, what we're going to be covering is a lot of conversations around what we can do to kind of upgrade and enhance our reports in Power BI through utilizing visualizations in a unique way, custom visuals, some things that also talk about layering to combine elements in a report to even create new visuals out of that. But like I said, I want to give you a little bit of history of who I am. So I've been in the BI business intelligence space now for about 9 years. Started with Excel Power Pivot like a lot of us and kind of worked my way through into Power BI. Back in the day, Power BI Designer before it actually was like out of preview release, and really just basically leaned heavily into that. I've been an MVP now for 3 years, should be getting my 4th chip now sometime in the next couple of months to go onto my little stack that I have, and have been very appreciative of Microsoft for getting those each year. A lot of that comes from lots of community contributions, user groups like these, things when it comes to also blogging and nowadays with video content. So I actually produce 1 to 2 videos a week on my YouTube channel. I've been doing a lot of live streams as well this year, getting pretty much everybody under the sun related to Power BI, experts in DAX, custom visuals. Even later this year, a bunch of Microsoft people. I actually just confirmed, for those of you who know anything about like DAX, Jeffrey Wang, who invented the DAX language for Microsoft and has been the head designer of it for the last decade. I'm going to actually have him on in about 3 months, which I'm really excited for, because he was the one who literally created it back in like 2008. So that's going to be a really awesome one. But I'll have all these links available at the end of the presentation to check out, including my website, and then of course any video content you want to check out as well for some supplemental material. But this topic and this presentation kind of alludes to just the specialty that I've somewhat placed myself in, where I've seen quite a few reports being built, often with good data, good modeling, but it's often like 2 different worlds when it comes to artistic design and coding. You're typically good at kind of front end or back end. I've found that not too many people can kind of dance between both very easily, and that's something that I just noticed that people kept coming to me more and more, is like, hey, you make really good, compelling reports. I like the aesthetic. They look good, but they also make sense, and you're using the right visuals. And so I kind of just continuously leaned into that as my specialty, because I don't think nearly as many people versus the larger spectrum of people who just build models in Power BI. There's a much smaller subset of people that do the modeling plus also build those impactful reports. So that's where a lot of the videos that I do and stuff just comes from finding unique ways to add things in the report layer to Power BI. But otherwise, that's kind of a little background about me, and let's also talk about what we will be going over today. The great thing with this is I like to describe this presentation as kind of like the Willy Wonka's everlasting gobstopper. Each time you try one, it has a different flavor. This presentation is kind of a similar concept, where this is a revolving door of things that I really like or I find useful. And as I constantly do videos, I'm for my YouTube channel, I'm very commonly coming up with new fun things to create, new designs, new visual concepts. So they get shuffled in and out of this thing as I continuously come up with new fun ideas. So in a year, this probably will be 60% new, maybe even more. There's a few things in here that have been in here a couple of years, but it's just basically a collection of some of the coolest, to me, tips and tricks related to Power BI and visual design. So it's something that will be in my repository for a very long time when it comes to core presentations that I like to give. And because of that, it's very modular. I can scale this to 30 minutes. I can scale this up to 2 hours. So we'll get through as much as we can today. I'm going to guess about half of what you see on here we'll be able to cover in 45 minutes to an hour. But anything remaining, I will also provide some links and resources for you to go check out how to do some of these other things as well that you see under this page. But this will be primarily demo driven. I will have parts at the end of each demo after them to answer questions and any things that you guys might have, whether or not that's in the chat window or just having you come off of mute and asking it. Either works for me. So I'll just make sure to pause and leave space for that, for any clarifying questions or curiosities. I will ask that at the end of each demo, the questions for those times, please keep them related to the demonstration itself. I also save about 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes at the very end of the presentation overall to just answer general questions about anything related to Power BI that you might want to ask me. But otherwise, the module questions we'll try to keep focused to pertaining to what was just presented. With that, though, I will go ahead and exit out of the PowerPoint and switch over to my first demo. Perfect. It's already up here. So this one's actually been in this presentation since day one, and it's something that I still present for a couple of reasons that I'll outline here in a second. So this visual is something that out of the box, and out of the box meaning kind of easy to configure, it isn't something that has conditional formatting. And by conditional formatting, I mean all of these little, the upper, middle, lower like dots that you see that are 3 colors or KPIs to kind of show you bands between high, medium, low. Those aren't things you can turn on by default in an align visual. If you actually come over to the format painter and look, normally for most things in Power BI, what you would be presented with is a little box with here with an F, terrible handwriting, F of X symbol, something like that, that would indicate you can add some type of conditional formatting logic to this. So it's not actually in the line chart yet. We can see that it is clearly visible on the line chart itself. So the reason that I was able to do this is I like to call it kind of a happy accident. And Power BI, one nice thing that you can do is you can very easily swap around your visuals using the pane up here. So I'd actually started with another visual, and to kind of reuse formatting, what I'll very often do is I'll kind of just copy and paste a visual onto the page, Control C, Control V, to then reuse title, background color, just some certain formatting options that I might want to repeat in a new visual. So I had started, I'm just going to delete that. I had started with a clustered column chart. And now notice or observe that under data colors, there is an F of X symbol that is right here, meaning I have applied some rule logic to this visual. If I open this, we will see, here we are, that there is a window that pops up, and doesn't really matter what the logic is. The goal of this is just to show you that conditional formatting can be migrated over to a different visual. So it had been set up in here, and when I swapped it around, the end result became this. And this was one of those kind of scenarios with a lot of product tools. You kind of wonder, wait, is this a bug or a feature? And whenever you have that thought, I would recommend the first step isn't to just not worry about it and just publish it anyway, because you don't want to publish something that is a bug that you present to a client as a feature and then have it go away in a month or two. So that was my immediate thought on this is, ooh, I love this, but I also, again, don't want to give this to a client and then, oh yeah, in 2 months it's gone, and well, you can't really add it back. They fixed it. They, corrected the issue. So I checked on some forums. I had actually seen a couple of other blogs that were on this at the time that talked about it. And thankfully, one benefit of being an MVP is I have somewhat of a short line to the product team at Microsoft. So I emailed a couple of my contacts and just said, hey, kind of discovered this. I've seen a few people blog about it. Are you going to patch this at any point to get rid of it? They mentioned that they weren't, and it's going to stay in there because at this point, enough people had discussed it that they don't want to remove it. I'm still waiting for the day that I will be able to just have an icon here for the F of X symbol. When that happens, I won't need to have this in my demonstration anymore because it's not going to be hidden. Nobody would really think to start on one visual and move it across to the next to find this. That's, again, I stumbled across it by accident, just complete happenstance. So the day that they add this symbol in there will be the day I get rid of this out of this presentation. But until then, it's a somewhat hidden feature that is reliable and stable, but it will not get patched at any point. To play the other side of devil's advocate, there's a couple things that you can't adjust. So the circles are the only shape that can appear on here. You can't change it to a diamond or a square or other symbols based on logic or anything. And you can't adjust the size of the dots. They will scale with the visual. If I make it smaller, the dots do get a little bit bigger. But otherwise, the only thing that you can actually adjust on here is whether or not the dots are visible and what the dot colors are. So, if I actually hadn't provided a band for the middle one or anything else, then those wouldn't appear. But that's the only thing that I have control over as the developer is the colors. So you can still use them to basically highlight highs and lows or all three, but everything else is less customizable. If you want something that has more variability of that, there are a few custom visual line charts that are some KPI visuals that have some advanced metrics and a lot more customization for that. But for basic formatting, this works very well. And if we get to it, I actually created even an updated version of this that I'll actually show pretty soon because it was a recent video I did just a couple of weeks ago that has another cool way to utilize these. Control a video device with your voice. Every once in a while, my Alexa thing kicks off, so apologies for that. Somehow she hears her name. Alexa, cancel. Okay, there we go. But with this, what I want to mention, I basically showed you the pros and cons of that and the way to apply it. And essentially, as the developer, if you ever need to change it, it's a matter of going back to another visual that allows for that editing and then customizing it, moving it back. So afterwards, you have essentially the That's the developer way to edit it at any point if you need it. But otherwise, it's very stable to, given the conditions that I've described, to publish this to the service. Now, one other part of this demo, kind of a two-part thing within this visual that I'll show, and then I'll open it up for questions. Another feature that came out about 1.5 years ago now. It feels like time flies sometimes. I loved when visual header tooltips came out for Power BI. This was something that I used to kind of build by myself before it was built in or baked into the visual. I would add an image onto the page, and on that image, I would have a tooltip that popped up to another page. I would figure out some ways to provide helper boxes to show up. I'd use bookmarks to create pop-up windows, but as you can, for anybody who's built either of those in any capacity in Power BI, you know that both of those take some time and effort. So they added an ability to add a little question mark icon into the corner. It would be nice if you could choose the icon. It's just going to be a circle with a question mark that shows up in the header itself. But you can put text and a few other things in there that I'll show you in a second to help explain something about the visual. I just put generated text in here that just came from the web just to show you what it's filled out on. But the things that I want to highlight in here are some workarounds for this. Now, number one, I will, as a developer, show you the pain point of how I do not like how it is set up to find this. So notice that in here, most of our items, x-axis, y-axis, title, background, etc., they have toggle switches. I can turn them on and off. The one that does not, for the most part, is here. There's a couple of others, but the majority of your menus, if you want them enabled to use in the visual, you just toggle the switch next to it. To find the visual header tooltip, to me, it's really buried. You have to open up the visual header menu. And the only reason that other menu is showing down here at the bottom is because I turned this on. So to get your visual header tooltip menu to show up, you have to open this menu, scroll all the way down to the very bottom of this menu, turn that on, then you get the other menu. So again, it's one of those things where unless you're going through every single item in the menu, that's something that can be very easily missed. So someday I would like them to this should just be permanently here as a menu, and then just move that radio button down. Just have a radio button on it. Don't ever hide it because they're not lacking that much room in here. I've emailed the product team and I've gotten a few people to vote on Power BI ideas for this, hoping at some point they do implement it. But again, it's one of those. It's a great feature. Sometimes some of these features are kind of hidden inside of the interface for developers to find. So I like to kind of highlight these to go and explore them. And there's a couple of other things I'll mention in here too. Opening that up, by default, we have a couple of limitations when it comes to visual header tooltips. The default type, notice that I changed this back to report page none. I will mention why I did that in a second. The default in here is standard tooltip pop-up that is limited to any text that you put into here to 250 characters. That limit just allows you to do plain text. You can't choose the orientation, you can't underline, highlight, add any images. It's standard text right alignment that goes into there, and then you hit a limit once you hit the very end, and just can't type anymore. 250 is the max, the characters that are in there. You have some customization over color, text, font, maybe some transparency, but it's a very basic, just standard text into here. So for basic needs where maybe you just need to put into here, this visual explains X, Y, and Z, sure, you just type a couple of sentences into there and you're good to go. If you want something richer and more dynamic, you can instead attach a report page tooltip to it that will then basically, it's rendering a different page. So that's what this is. When I click on information tooltip, what this is actually doing here is that's not just rendering the tooltip box anymore. This is a created page in my report that just has text into here. So I can actually have full creative freedom of putting whatever I want into this report tooltip page. That's actually located down here. I have a hidden page called information tooltip. And to turn a page into a tooltip page, the only thing you need to do if you create a new page is go to format, make sure that tooltip is turned on here, and then what you want to do is the page size needs to be customized. Like I'm using a tooltip size that is the type of the pixel that you want. That's standard, but 320 by 240, because when it renders at a 1-to-1 ratio. So if you have a 1080 page that's, let's say, like this big, let me just show you what will happen. I'll go here. As you can see, It's a little bit big on my report screen. I have a 3K monitor, but still, that is a massive tooltip that we do not want rendered on here. So it's important to make sure that you set the page size on the tooltip page to be a small compact size. Most of the time, 320 by 240 works, but let's say that you want it just a little bit wider. Actually, I want it I meant to do 3. There you go. Maybe I need it a little bit taller to make room for some more words. So I can actually choose to align it, but I generally start by putting it on tooltip first. And then if I need it slightly wider, slightly taller, I just tweak it from there. But the end goal is that because this is just a page, there you go. I have full creative freedom to put whatever I want on here. I just put a text box in and made it look like a tooltip page text. Or just a standard tooltip text box, but I have now in this here creative freedom to bold it, underline it. I can do carriage returns. If I wanted to, I could even indent it. I basically can do whatever I want with this text box. I could even add visuals into here if I really wanted to. I could put a little bar chart at the top to maybe show a trend if I really wanted to. Personally, I haven't found that much use to put any kind of other information into there besides helper text and descriptors, but you could build a tiny page into there. The reason I've not deployed visuals into there with data is that there is no filter context that comes through the report tooltip header. While a regular tooltip, like if I hovered, do I have tooltips turned off? Here we go. If I like these, that provides filter context. So this is basically filtering the data into here. If I had a report tooltip for this visual that was going to pop up in here, that would also have filter context that came from the visual for the data point I'm hovering over. This has no filter context. It doesn't know if any filters have been applied. Any filters that are applied to the visual in the filters pane don't go through. So again, I found very little use to adding visuals to it, but at least for as far as a text box goes, you can maybe add a little logo in there or a small header with information. You can customize it and tweak it to fit whatever formatting works for you, and it gives you more space to get past the 250 character limit and do additional formatting if you want to with the text itself. But those are the two primary things that I wanted to show as part of this first demo, kind of a 2-for-1 package. It was the line chart that we have in front of us, and additionally, it was talking about the native visual header tooltip and some creative uses on how to also circumvent the the character limit, and then how to do some additional formatting as well using a hidden report tooltip page. Are there any questions on either of these two before I go to the next demo?
So we did have, we had a question and then a comment. The
Sure.
comment is, I wonder if the tooltip could be used to hold QR codes as well as a link to help pages.
You could use a QR code, but again, a QR code would be better represented to use as a tooltip here, where that's something that comes through with the filters. Because there are two tooltips, page tooltips that can be applied to a report. The visual header one, which has no ability to get any filters from this visual. It's simply just a single tooltip assigned to this visual. Then there's the tooltips that are actually part of the visual itself, where anytime you hover over a category, filters are passed from here into this tooltip. And that can either be the little standard card you see, or you could actually, for the regular tooltips, filtered ones, you can also assign it to a report page. So in that case, yes, you could potentially use a QR code in there, but then kind of my question is the goal of like holding it here and then taking your phone and scanning it with your phone off of the computer screen? So I would be curious of the use case, but that is, I'm assuming, is what you would probably want to do, is have a tooltip pop up with that image. And that can be done. There is a couple of custom visuals. One is called the HTML viewer. And what that can do is render any HTML image for you. And I believe I don't have them on hand, but I know there's a couple websites that if you give it the URL string plus the unique number, that's the QR code number, it will generate a QR code for you. So in theory, it's possible. I just not have done it, but I know that all of the pieces required for that do exist. Do you think you said you had another comment or question?
Yeah. So if a link is put in there, do you have the ability to click on it?
No, tooltips cannot be clicked on because they're attached to where your mouse is. Your mouse moves, the tooltip will move with it. There's no way for you just to hold it and move it. So inside of the tooltip is completely you cannot interact with it in any way. The interaction comes from the element that I'm hovering over has a date filter. This is March. This is February, etc. So that is the interaction that's happening, which is filters propagated from this visual to that. But you cannot go inside of it. It is a view only window that you're appearing into onto the other page.
Okay, thank you. Those were the only questions for this section.
All right. Close this. And I'm going to jump around a bit, and I'm going to demo this one because it's an evolution, and I actually might change the order. That's adjustable bands. A really fun one that I did. And recently I was given, every once in a while, I'm giving Kevin an epiphany of something to create. It's one of the reasons that I actually love to develop still, as much as I enjoy training, is that somebody throws a scenario at me if I want to do X, Y, and Z. And you know what? I've never thought of building a visual like that with these features, but let me figure out how to do it. This was something that kind of was presented to me by a client that I figured out. So here, I'll start with the result, end result. Here's the end result that I made. So very similar line chart, actually the exact same one because I used that file as a starting point, but a couple of things to highlight in here. So we still have the KPI dots that are in here, but what I also added is instead of having all three, I just wanted to call out upper and lower. So that's why there's no dots in the middle. And then additionally is, all right, well, I figured that out as a step one. So my final step is, all right, it wasn't clear enough. So how can I actually add bands that also show up to highlight where that cutoff line is? As you can see, anything inside of it shows up, anything outside of it does not. So if I reduce this, there you go. You can see that the ones start to disappear if I move it up. So both the dots appear and the line moves at the same time. Same with the high range as well. Now this one will get a little, the DAX itself has a few steps to it, so I won't get too much into the weeds in it, but I do want to just show you from a conceptual level kind of what I did. The easiest part, honestly, was just configuring the visual by itself just to have these. But this is where I started, and it's kind of those scenarios where, okay, I've made this, how can I make it better? And I iterated through multiple versions. I figured out how to do this, and then from there, I want to align. I would like to see where my cutoff line is because I can guesstimate, but it's still not perfectly clear where that break point is because I have to find the lowest dot to know where that line is. I figured out how to put the lines into there, and then finally figured out how to color them in. So I'll start from here. And there's a few things that actually go into this one. So the low and high ranges are actually simply what if scenarios that are in the model itself. So those are things that you can add from right here, modeling. And they used to be called what if, now they're called parameters. But essentially, it allows you to create a table that disconnected table in your model that lets you have a range that basically feeds in to a measure, which can then be used in a calculation with other things. If you've not used these before, they're very useful. It allows you to create a query and some stuff to determine ranges. In this case, I think I went from like 0 to 60, 60 to 100, basically for my low and high ranges. But you just give it a name, tell you what the data type is. Mine is percentage, so I actually started with minimum is 0. I think maximum would be 0.60, and then increment 1% each time would be 0.01, and then whatever the default is if they clear the slicer. So setup is fairly simple for that, and then it generates just two things into your report page. It creates for you a DAX generated table, which just has a column, which is the high range there. That is the column that has a series between, in this case, 50 and 101. Oddly enough, I have to actually put this into here. If I say I want my range between 50 and 100, it won't actually let me toggle the slider all the way up to 100%. It stops at 99. So basically, whatever your max is, it will allow you to do one increment below that. So that's one of the only reasons that I do 101% into there. But I have these two. They're disconnected, and the only thing that it does is it creates a measure next to it, just so I can show you what this is. Let me put this right here. There we go. It's a measure that simply just returns whatever my selection is in here. Actually, there you go. So that is just harvesting whatever the selection is coming from this column. It's a very simple measure that just has selected value from here. So basically, it's as long as I'm making a selection on the that generated column, it's going to return that value for me, and I can use that because it's isolated by itself, and I can use that in other calculations to basically create calculations from there. So you've seen kind of what if slicer is. The next thing that I want to show you, let me get rid of this, is what I did in the visual itself. And again, there will be a few steps in the DAX calculation because I actually had to calculate myself what the max is, what the min is, and a few others. So you'll see that in just a minute. Give me one quick sec to remember what the measure name is, and then I'll go back to you. Okay, hello KPI colors. I'm going to come over to my measures table, and we're going to go to here. There we are. Like I said, there's a few variables that I declared into here. I start with, in general, there's two scenarios that I like for variables that in DAX, if you've not used them yet. Number one, they're a performance optimizer. And any time you actually have something that's calling upon a calculation repeatedly, it's like a temp table. It takes the calculation, stores it, and then allows you to retrieve it again and again without having to recalculate it every time. So the other nice thing, though, as well, that I do in here is it cleans up the calculation. Because I have all of these with friendly names, by the time I get to my result variable, which is what I'm actually going to calculate, I can have nice clean words in all of these spots to determine the logic. But basically what I need to do, because I'm creating my own percentage range, I have a max, I have a min, and the goal of this is I want to show for my low range, everything that's 30% or below of the range between min and max, show red, or 15%, then it drops it down. So basically it's the lower 30% and the upper 71% between those two. So that's what these both allow me to do. So it's anything above 82 is going to get highlighted green. Anything below 30 is going to get highlighted. So that's what those ranges are doing. And that's basically getting calculated in here, where I determine what my metric max is and my min. So I'm basically doing a max X across all the months and years, and then the min X across all the months and years. The X functions basically just means it creates a virtual table of a distinct row of every single month and year and the unit value, which is what you see on this visual. Each one of these is a month and year, and the all statement allows it to look across this entire range, basically across any of them, ignore the filter context to determine for the entire visual what is the penultimate max, what is the ultimate minimum. So it creates the range for me, and that is what we have here. My range was created just by subtracting the two, and then from there I determined kind of essentially what the percentage would be. Like if I have on 180, like the range between the two is 180, that translates each time you go like up a unit of one, that is a ratio of a 0.7% or 1.2%. I needed to actually know what that percentage is that goes up and down to translate it back into here. So basically that's kind of the conversion that goes through all of this, and basically how high it is from the min. So end goal is really just determining if it's above the high range value, which is that slicer, color it green. If that metric percentage of range that I basically ended up calculating, if that is below the low range one, which is here, it returns red. So I'm basically calculating the range, converting that to a percentage to then be able to compare to the sliders that I have and then create those KPIs in here. By the way, this file is available for download, as with all of these, on my blog files page on my website. So if you want to download these later, again, the references at the end of this presentation will have a couple of links to go to my site where then you can access the files page that will have these. And at this point, I've done 130 videos now on YouTube, and I probably have at least 60 or 70 different files across all my videos to download. So a lot of good free material there. All right, so at least I explained this one, and I'm not going to go to the middle one. I basically want to show what I did for this final one. And this is actually a little bit of clever layering that's actually been done. So notice that this is actually a couple of visuals. So I'm going to select this. I'm going to go up to View. I'm going to go to my selection pane, and it's actually a group. In here, there is a couple of things. There's background, high, low lines, and unit forecast. So I'm going to toggle these off one at a time. So I'm going to turn off the background. You notice that there's actually, neither of them have a background in there. But if I hide the top visual, I actually have a second visual behind the first one that is creating my bands for me. And the reason I had to do this is I tried to figure out if there was any way for me to add in the same visual the bands that I had made in here. And the problem was the conditional formatting dots were starting to show up on other data points that I didn't want to, and it basically just didn't work. So I essentially created in here a secondary visual. This visual itself is a stacked area chart. And the reason that I used an area chart is because it's like a line chart, but it fills in the area with a color. So in here, I basically created a low, medium, mid, and high, and I turned those into percentages. So essentially the actual axis in here, if it's colored in, because what I did is I turned everything else to white to basically hide it from the top visual. But as you can see, when you have transparent color applied, you can layer visuals to create your own custom visual, essentially, without actually having to use any custom visual or build your own. But if I was to go into here, I have the axis in here. If I turn this on, there we go. Notice that it's just a 0 to 100 scale. So it's converting itself in this range essentially to the range that I'm putting into here. And I have 3 values in here. I have 3 metrics. That is my low range, my mid range, and my high range. And that's being calculated between all of these that are in here. Each one of these, if I open that up, there you go. My low range value, which is just nothing. And then what I kind of do is I do a subtraction of each other. So my mid range is going to be whatever this amount should be minus this, because they're stacked. I don't want them to go past 100. So they have to be kind of a growth consumption into each other. The mid-range has to be the total amount for the mid-range minus that lower one, because it's sitting on top of it. So that's now going to accurately be the correct height of the mid-range, because it's been stacked upon a part of it that's already, raised up from the lower one. And then the high range is the original high range value percentage minus the mid and the lower. So as I move these around, here we go. The values change, but it never goes above 1, because the subtractions are happening accurately. As this number grows, a greater number is being subtracted from the high range. So it keeps it anchored at that. And then the clever formatting that was done into here was just to make sure that when I have this turned on, very importantly, I like pixel by pixel, I kind of moved this around onto the screen, because I really wanted to make sure that the top axis here ends at the top axis for the top visual, and same with the bottom, because otherwise what you'll have, go back, there you go. Otherwise what you'll have in here, if you don't have them like perfectly aligned this way, is the line might start to go below it, even though the dot's still showing. So this way, adjusting it and getting them, like, again, nice and pixel perfect, that means that the ranges of each visual are always going to be perfectly aligned that way, even as the data adjust around. So that line will stay consistent, and it's converting correctly that percentage range that I'm showing you to those actual numbers on the first visual. And I achieved that, again, trying to figure out a few different ways to do it, using an area chart to create those colors into there. So starting, honestly, just from, my zoom in tool gets rid of my mouse sometimes. There you go. Starting from initially here, not really being happy with that, because I wanted a clear-cut indication of where those ranges were in resulting of this. And there are some custom visuals that let you do that, a few paid in the custom visual store. But whenever I can, I like to figure out, hey, is there any way to layer this and give something out of the box that's or better said, using native visuals that doesn't require having to buy a visual or anything else. There are a couple of pitfalls to this. Like, as an example, if somebody uses the focus mode, you only get the top visual. There's no way to focus mode multiple visuals at the same time. So you do lose a little bit. You don't get the bands, but you still get the dots. So a few minor caveats to be aware of. But but you also have scenarios where you can present it to the client and then ask them, like, hey, is this a game stopper, or is this something that, for the cost of having a free visual instead of having to buy one, is it worth it for you? And so far, I've actually deployed this to the client who wanted it, and they're very happy with it. But as you can see, there's many ways, and this is just one of them, where you can layer visuals on top of each other. Other than that, though, are there any questions on this one?
There are no questions in the chat, but if anybody has one, you can put your hand up now. You can pause.
And give it a second, and then I'll start swapping over to my next one. I think I got a notification, at least from Teams, unless nothing came up. Okay. New messages. Nope. Cool. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. And where is toggle buttons? Here we go. And this one's going to actually have a conversation around buttons, and I think a really unique way to build buttons to look very much not like the standard buttons that you'd even see in Power BI. Again, came from a client scenario. So they had not this exact thing, but they had a report page that needed a toggle between a couple of things, and they wanted kind of a radio toggle, a little button thing that goes back and forth. So basically this, that's something where if you zoom out, I built a button that allows you to kind of toggle between two visuals. In their instance, it actually went between report pages, but either way, I'm using this to trigger between A and B. And the button itself is the highlight that I'm trying to make. So I actually used a standard button in Power BI to make this. It almost looks like it could have been an image that I built or something else, and that was my first thought. But again, my conversations to myself is, can I do this out of the box with just the built-in stuff into Power BI without having to go to Photoshop or anything else and make something else? Because you can use images in buttons, and I've also found some unique ways to add GIFs and some other animated buttons in Power BI, but I really just wanted to see if I can use the formatting to build this, and I managed to do, I think, a pretty good job of it. The client was happy with this. So I kind of want to walk you through how to kind of uniquely use buttons in Power BI to build something like this. So these are actually two different things. Let me take out the button and zoom over here and walk you through it. So notice that there's kind of three states for this button. There is the default, hover, click. That is something that's set up over here under the button text. So the great thing with buttons, and one of the reasons that I love them for not only actually making buttons, but I actually use a lot of clever ways with buttons to do custom visuals and making cards and a bunch of other stuff, primarily because we have alignment. I can actually choose top, middle, bottom, right, middle, left. So that's actually what I did into here is for the default state, which is what it's doing when your mouse isn't touching it. I have it on the right. My hover state has this in the middle, which is there. My on press state has it on the left, which is here when I click it. Or sorry, on press. And the button's text in here, and I have to zoom out for this one. If you press the Windows key and semicolon, you get an emoji keyboard that pops up. And I actually just searched for circle. I'm going to zoom in just for a second. Notice that whatever I type in here, and this is what I mean when it kind of breaks a little bit. If you type in circle, it gives you a filtered list of things that have a circle in here. And I found, oh, white circle. That's a perfect little radio switch, toggle switch that I can move back and forth. So that's what I put into here. I will mention that there's a caveat with emojis that go into Power BI. ASCII symbols, like up arrows, anything else that you can color with actual font color, like this cannot be colored by font color. It is its own like generated emoji that is generated by the emoji library in Windows. Now, emphasis on Windows, Mac, Linux, Apple, Android, all have similar but different emoji libraries, and the symbol looks different. So this button on an Apple computer could have a bit of a shadow on it or something else. So know that, just consider the device your person is on if you are adding any of these, colorful emojis into there, because it might look good with the Windows version, but maybe then you realize that they don't like how it looks on their phone or anywhere else. So that's the one caveat. I found very little issue with it. Most people consume these on Windows devices, better said just PCs. But if they're on mobile or anything else, it might just be good to try it, test it, and see what it looks like. And depending on how strict their marketing and color criteria are for branding, is the word I'm thinking about, might be. But otherwise, it's one of the reasons that I love the buttons. So I was able to create kind of those three perspectives. Similarly, for the fill, my default is blue, and I kind of picked a neutral gray color to kind of end in the middle and then switch over to purple. So the two perspectives for this is left and right. I just kind of picked two colors arbitrarily to assign for these. And the last thing that I'll mention, the outline is the other really important part. If I turn this back off, that's what a standard button looks like. It's a square, but the button has an option in here to include rounded edges. So if I turn that on, I can kind of make it a wrapped edge like you would expect to see in a radio toggle, and that gives it that kind of rounded look that really makes it, it kind of hits it home as like a toggle button. So between all of these and how much things you can customize in this, I was able to do it pretty much with everything out of the box. The only small thing that has a contingency on devices was just the fact that I was using a rich symbol. I could have also just put there are a couple of like bullet little ASCII symbols you can put into there. That's just going to be colored by whatever color you put into here. So there are some less formatted ones. And the reason I picked this is because I like the fact that it had an outline to it. So I really appreciated that it was white in the middle with a little outline. And so, it looked a little bit cleaner for me, but I also know for the client I'm delivering this to is its Windows devices are the only things you're consuming this on. So that will 100% work that way. This is more about focusing on a button, less about understanding bookmarks and everything else as far as the tutorial goes, but really just showing you how much you can customize a bookmark button. It doesn't just have to be a box with a word in it. Like if I was just to go and add a button to the page, most of us, out of the box button, it's literally just a box, with an icon in there you can click. There's so many ways you can format it to customize it. And like I said, there's actually even options where if you really wanted to, you can create images. And these images can be a lot of different things. So pretty much any image that you can think of under the sun, including SVGs, which also can be animated, GIFs, etc., all can be uploaded into here. So they can have many ways that you can highly customize them. But overall, though, we're about 3:20. Are there any questions on creating the button toggle that I can cover?
There's no questions in the chat right now, but once again, if you do have a question, you can raise your hand and I can call on you.
All right. I think there's one last quick one that I'll show, and then I'll switch it over to just general questions, just to be conscious of time. I'll close this out. And this one's a really fast and easy one, this one right here. So this one was a visual that I came across on Google Analytics. So when I first started making the report for that 4 years ago now, it's actually one of the things that I sell on my website is kind of a plug and play template that you can attach your view ID, it connects to it. And again, I'll have a link to that later on. But I saw this on the Google Analytics homepage, and I see a question from one person. I'll get to that after I finish this now. And I really just, I liked this visual. Like, oh, it's a great heat map. It was exactly by days of week, hours of day, but it shows a clustering of like where visitation was happening. Often with traffic or anything else, you're trying to see time of day of occurrences. I thought it was just a very nice display of the patterns of data. This is, it's 3 years old now for my website data, but this kind of shows you where most commonly people came to visit my website. Usually between about, looks like 6 a.m. and noon Pacific Standard Time, Tuesday through Thursday. That's kind of where the cluster of most of this stuff was happening. And my first thought was, all right, we don't have it. There's no heat map visual in Power BI. All right, let's go check the custom visual store. And I found one that they have. Microsoft makes technically a custom, a heat map custom visual, but it didn't have that many features. It wasn't that customizable. And as a brief tangent, I'll mention some of the reasons why I should say just be careful with custom visuals. I love them. I support them. I have a lot of visual reports with them, but for security reasons, they just run a little bit slower. Native visuals, when they are loading in your browser, browsers, by the way, are single-threaded. So they actually load one visual element on your report page at a time. There's no multi-threading where they can all load at once. It really does it sequentially. And as that happens, native visuals can share library resources. So common elements between visuals can be called, the first visual loads and the other ones can already load that pre-loaded library of, again, shared attributes between them. So they can load a little bit faster that way. Custom visuals, for security reasons, they don't really want them to dip into other visuals that have other data. Just, it's a safety thing. Regardless of if it's certified or anything else, they're just being protective of the client data. So custom visuals have to load their library completely by themselves, even if other ones had a shared resource for that. So, they'll load 80 to 90% of the speed or lower of a native visual. Again, many reasons to still use them, but this is more of a caution about don't build a report page with 35 custom visuals on the page and then wonder why you try to load in the browser. Oh, yeah, this is going really slow. Why is it taking so long to load? It's probably a reason is you have way too many custom visuals on the page. So this is an example of when I didn't need one because I actually started and created a matrix table. Basically put these on the hours on rows, columns and weekday, and the page views value. And a little bit of formatting magic on this can actually turn that into a heat map. So in this case, I just go to conditional formatting for the page views value. I'm going to start with background color. There we go. And I'm just going to put light blue, dark blue. There you go. I don't really like red and green unless it really is meaning positive, negative. This is more of just less and more. So it's closer, but I don't really need to show the data label. The point of a heat map is not to show every data point, it's to show the patterns. I can get the data point if I hover. So to get rid of that, there's not a hide values option in here, but if you apply the same conditional formatting logic to the font color, that's going to achieve the same effect. So font color now. And the rules that can be applied to font and background are identical other than what am I applying it to. Hit OK. And there we go. You've basically hidden the font because the color is going to match the same thing as it. I still get the data labels if I hover, but now it's just a much cleaner perspective. So I think this is a great way to show you. You don't always have to use a custom visual, but also that the matrix table can be a visual too. It doesn't just have to be a table. Like this is now, it's not really a table anymore in a sense. It's because you're not just getting raw numbers. You are getting the patterns, the trends with the data via the grid that is presented into this. But it's a really quick addition. But I think it just shows you some very unique ways to utilize the matrix table itself. We are at 25, so I think I'll use this to now open up questions in general. I do see that I have one up here. So what I'll do is let me do a quick recap, throw up my references slide up here, and then I will answer questions for the last couple of minutes. So let me pull this up. There we go. Kind of swap again. There we go. Okay, so let me just give my spiel on this. Presentation PDF is available at the top link. The QR code will take you to my main website page. Links to my consulting services and files and templates. I also provide a 30% discount code to anybody that attends these, just kind of as a thank you for giving time out of your day to come and listen to some of the stuff that I have to say. So that's either consulting, training, or just, again, I have a bunch of files and templates for getting started in Power BI, calendar tables, Google Analytics report. I also just released a training course as well that launched about a week ago now, that actually talks about designing impactful reports, that's hosted on my colleague Matt Allington, another MVP, his website, and that's all available on my page. There's a menu for training services. And then YouTube, it really does help my channel to grow if you subscribe to that. It continues to promote it on YouTube and just helps me make more videos. So if you like this content, I would encourage you to subscribe there. And my LinkedIn, you're welcome to throw me a question if you ever have any questions on Power BI, or there's something that you're just curious about when it comes to getting started with the tool set. As long as you're not giving me a 3-page question and something that's going to take an hour, those I usually kindly defer to consulting hours, which I do sell. But otherwise, if you have a 5-minute question, I answer those throughout the week, and I'm happy to just give people direction on various topics, because I know I learned a lot that way about asking experts myself on community forums. With that, though, I'll keep this up, and I will go over to the chat window, and I see there's a few questions up. So the first one is, can we use these buttons as slicers to show 2 different charts? That's what was showing already. So when the toggle button was toggling between 2 visuals, I was showing and hiding 2 different visuals in the report page. So I'll pull that up and just show that quickly. Here we go. So let me open my selection pane on this. And it's not a slicer. That's different. I don't use the word slicer for buttons, because a slicer is an actual visualization type in Power BI that takes a column and gives you that pick list. It's a visual that's rendering that list for you. Buttons are different, but this, I might have to zoom out a little bit to show this. So if I open up my visuals, notice that I have 2. There's one hidden, one showing. When I toggle this, that actually toggles to an entirely different visual that is now showing with this hidden. So I'm actually toggling between 2 of them. Bookmarks can toggle visibility. So yes, you can use a bookmark to toggle between 2 of them. I just have them stacked on top of each other, and the bookmark basically hides one, shows the other, hides this, shows the other one. So it's switching between the 2 of them. Let's see, we had another question. Great presentation. Do you have any recommendations for making a Gantt chart? I think there's a couple of custom visuals, yeah, that have this. I know they charge that. I swear I've seen a couple of people blog about doing that in a matrix visual, where as long as you have the grid, with weeks or dates, there's a way to add KPI icons to kind of show you the growth and between the periods, and that's using a matrix table. I don't have a link on top of my head, but I'm pretty sure that's been built. So I would recommend maybe just Googling Gantt chart Power BI matrix table, and I would suspect that there should be a couple of links to some blog articles that talk about that, because I've seen that come up in my feed of, might have been Parker Stevens or somebody else another MVP who did those. And otherwise, we'll put this back up. One other thing that I'll just mention here, this one. So this QR code, this is one of the fun thing that I do with people who attend. This takes you to a link to my blog page, and if you sign up, your name goes into a hat, and what I will do with that is then pick a name out of that hat, and that person will get an hour of free consulting with me to pick my brain, have me help you on a project or anything else. So you're welcome to do that, and you can cancel at any time with the blog. Of course, it just signs you up in MailChimp, and you can opt out. But the entry will give you a chance to get an hour of consulting if you need any help with Power BI. Just again, as one more like little fun grab bag thing to throw into the presentation. It looks like I'm exactly on time at 3:30. So again, you can either drop a question into the chat or take yourself off mute. Oh, Jared, looks like we have one for. Do you have any good resources for getting started with good UI? You know what? During the next presentation, I will grab a couple of them and I'll throw them into the chat.